I have to confess, I watched that video and I got curious. I had to know, so I Googled medulla oblongata and anger, and I kid you not, of the 200,000 hits, the very first hit came up, despite what was said in the movie The Waterboy. I don't know what that says about our culture. I wasn't taken to a scientific journal. I wasn't taken to a map of the brain. I was taken to an Adam Sandler movie. That's kind of interesting. Now, I know you're curious, so let me just read the whole quote to you. Despite what was said in the movie The Waterboy, anger and aggression is not really controlled by the medulla. The medulla serves autonomous functions such as respiration. So, evidently, Mama was right. Well, as I said a moment ago, we are well into the series Refrigerator Rights. If you've been out, you're wondering, what do we mean by refrigerator rights? Let me do my best to kind of bring us all up to speed here today. We all know that we live in a world with a great many challenges. There are challenges you face in your own life, some only you know. Some the people around you know, but very real challenges, work challenges, family challenges. Maybe you're doing battle with an addiction. I don't know, just we all face challenges. Then you flip on the news. There are some very real challenges in this world. Countries are at odds with each other. Bombs are blowing up. Just poverty and hardship and famine and some very real difficulties in this world. And you look at all of that, and you look at your own life, and you look at what's going on in the world, and you can't help but think to yourself, I got to do something about this. I got to do something about my own life. I got to do something about the world, but there's no way I can do this on my own. I absolutely must be in relationship with people, which is one of the more significant reasons as to why we do this thing called church. Church is a group of people. It's not a spectator sport. It's a group of people coming together to make a difference in each other's lives and a difference in this world, right? Now, the reality is, though, that if that happens, there are going to be some real challenges. And one of the challenges is just figuring out, do I really have that kind of relationship? Am I really connected to people? And so we kind of came up with this yardstick, borrowing it from a book we read, called Refrigerator Rights. Very simply, we ask the question, do you have people in your life who have rights to your refrigerator? They come into your house or you go into their house and you can open up the refrigerator and you can take something out of it and that wouldn't be shocking to them. That's refrigerator rights. Now, I was thinking about this and was thinking about, what's kind of another example of what real refrigerator rights would look like? Because obviously we're speaking metaphorically. So I was watching my own life and I got one this past Monday night when I was on the treadmill. I was on the treadmill and the doorbell rang, and so I leave the treadmill kind of all sweaty, and I go downstairs and I open the door, and there's our friend Christine. And Christine is stopping by to see my wife, Deborah. And so she's like, hey, what's Deb doing? And I said, she's upstairs, she's in bed, she's reading a book, which, nothing unusual. We like to read at night. And I just kind of instinctively say to Christine, hey, go on up. She'll be glad to see you. Because I knew that my wife really would genuinely be glad to see Christine. I didn't give much thought to the fact that Deb was like in bed. Christine didn't give much thought to it either because she just kind of marched right up the stairs. Are you sure it's okay? None of that, right? Because Christine's family and my family, we're deep friends. We've known each other, been in networks together, life groups together. We have a great relationship. So she goes upstairs and sits down on the bed and talks to Deb for a good 30, 45 minutes. I go finish my treadmill routine, all that. And I'm thinking about it later, and I'm thinking, that's refrigerator rights. I think we misnamed it, though. We should call it bedroom rights because that's what, and then I know that could kind of miscommunicate what we're after here at Gateway. But you get the idea. We'll stick with refrigerator rights. It's safe in the kitchen. Whatever you call it, though, whatever you call it, today, we're going to dig into, and hear this very carefully, what may be the absolute best part about refrigerator rights, coupled with simultaneously being the worst part of refrigerator rights. It's both of those things. Because when you go to the refrigerator and you discover that somebody stole your tiramisu, it brings out emotion in you, or whatever it is that represents. And you think about this, and it's interesting because you hear us say, we want to be in a relationship with each other. We want to do life together. We want to help each other out, and we want to do something meaningful in this world. And my strong suspicion is that you kind of have that internal head nod. Like, I know that that's true. I know that that's good. I know I should want that, but here's reality. The reality is you and me we don't want to get hurt. And we don't want to get offended. And we don't want to get taken advantage of or taken from. We don't want any of those things. And we know this because we've done enough life. We know that relationships, they can be challenging. They can be very, very difficult. Go around the room here. We know this by experience. Go person by person if we have time. And there's broken marriages. There's broken business partnerships. There's that church you spun out of that kind of went sideways. There's all these different things. There's generational challenges with aging parents or whatever the case may be. Relationships can be very, very difficult. And so you come to church and you hear us say, man, you got to get in a network and you got to get in a life group because we want you to be relationally engaged. We want you to know people and have them know you. We want you to serve people and have them serve you. We want you to love people and have them love you. And you hear that and you think, well, that's good. I get that, but here's the deal. I tried that once. I went to that group and it just wasn't what I thought it would be. Or I really got involved. Things were going great. And we were making a difference in the world and it was making a difference in my life and really great things were happening and all of that. But then something happened. And you explain that and you go, I had to back away. Now I hear that. And I have to be honest, my response is often, you may have backed off just when it was getting good. Because yes, conflict is the worst part of relationships, but conflict is the best part of relationships. And I know that that's going to take some convincing of you, not that it's the worst part, but that it's the best part. So part of my mission today is to do my best to explain why I really think it is the best part. I want to start by giving you a benefit I discovered as a young pastor when I took on the first marriage crisis counseling that I ever had. And again, I was a young pastor, got a call from this couple in the church I was at the time, and they needed marriage counseling, and they kind of described their problems to me, and that was no problem at all, because as a young pastor, I knew exactly how to fix them. This was going to be easy. And so we set a date and we set a time, and I kid you not, I grabbed my flip chart and I put it in the back of my car, and I drove over to their house and I set the flip chart up in the family room, and I started listening to their problems, and it was great, because she started saying, well, he did this, and then he didn't do that, and he was thinking this, and he felt that, and I'm thinking, man, this guy's terrible. And I start drawing on the flip chart, like, here's how you need to behave better, buddy. Here's how you could be at least a halfway decent husband. But then he starts talking, he says, but you don't understand. She did this and she did that and she said this and she felt this. And I'm thinking, whoa, man, that must be tough being married to her. And so let me flip chart this out for you, turn a page and fix her real quick. They're divorced now. So I'm pretty much a genius. I did discover something. I discovered an issue that I see time and again. I see it in marriages, I see it in families, I see it in business relationships, I see it in churches, I see it in friendships. It's the problem of what I call disproportionate reaction. What is disproportionate reaction? I'm listening to this couple, and I'm there with my flip chart, and she tells me again, like, he did this and didn't do that and all this, and I'm going and flip charting, and then, he's doing this. And after a while, I'm thinking, man, this flip chart is not delivering what it's supposed to deliver. It's not working. There's something deeper going on here. There's something more significant. And I'm realizing it's this issue of disproportionate reaction, because she's talking about an offense. And I hear that and I go, yeah, he was wrong in that. But she's treating that offense like it's a 9 or a 10. It's not a 9 or a 10. It's a 4 or a 5. And then he's doing something or saying something about what she's doing, and he's right. He's completely justified in being mad about that, but it's not a 7 or an 8, it's a 1 or a 2. And round we go. Well, finally, I put the marker down, and I have this question. And they don't like to hear it, and none of us like to hear it. I wouldn't like to hear it either, but the question is real simple. I ask it as gently as I can. Why are you so angry? Why are you so angry? Or why are you being so sensitive on this issue? Which they really don't like it when you word it that way. But It's a fair question. It's also a challenging question because truth be told, most of us don't know how to answer because most of us don't know the answer because the answer to that question is behind us, wrapped up in other relationships, in other wounds, in other hurts, in other things that have happened in our lives. And the best way I know how to explain it is with these really cool glasses that I picked up on the internet. I'm going to start wearing these. So these glasses are glasses that I see the world through. I see you all through them, and you look great. I see all my family through these. I see my work relationships through these glasses. I see the world through these glasses. And that's fine because it's nice and clear. But then there's a problem. The problem is that you do something and it offends me. And it makes me mad. And so I have these little lenses that I get. These are some red lenses, okay? And I put these in these cool little glasses. And now when I look at you, I see you as red. And that's fine because you were mean to me. And I should see you as red. But the problem is I see everybody as red. And I go home and I see my wife as red, and I see my kids as red, and I'm at the counter when I'm trying to check out, and the clerk is taking too long, and I see red. And my neighbor who hasn't mowed his yard in 6 weeks, I see red, and so on and so forth. And I don't do anything about these because I don't really want to talk to you about it. I don't want to deal with it. I just want to be mad for a while because it feels good to be mad, which isn't a problem until someone else does something, and some other lenses get put into this. And now I've got two sets of lenses because I got double offenses. And now, not only am I seeing color, but I'm not really seeing well at all. And then another offense happens, and I got more lenses up here. And now I can't see reality. I can't even see you. I don't know how to see straight right now because I've got these lenses on my face that are coloring everything I see. And then what happens is I've got this problem, I call it disproportionate reaction. Because everything that happens, I see through these lenses. And everything that happens is colored by these past experiences and past things that have happened. And that's a problem. Because I don't want to live that way. I don't want to be the kind of person who sees a distortion of reality. I mean, if somebody offends me, then yeah, I want to deal with that. But I don't want them to have to be dealing with old family wounds or old relationship wounds or old work wounds. I want them to be able to deal with that wound, that thing that happened right there in that instant. When we let these pile up on top of each other, before you know it, there's a pastor in your living room with a flip chart trying to fix you by telling you how to do every different situation correctly. But the issue isn't the situation, right? The issue is that you're seeing life through these lenses, which is why conflict is not only the worst part of refrigerator rights, it's also the best. Because Proverbs 17:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Your relationship with me, it exposes my lenses. And yes, I can run from that relationship, but if I'm willing and I engage that relationship instead, I'm actually going to discover some things about myself. And one by one, over time, I'm going to start pulling these lenses out. And before long, I'm going to start seeing clearly again. I'm going to start seeing life. I'm going to start seeing real color and the beauty of life rather than seeing everything in various shades of red. I want to be a free person. I don't want to be enslaved to anger and bitterness and the crud of my life. I want to be free from that. Now, I can isolate myself and just go into my corner and keep my lenses where they are. Or I can engage the world relationally and discover all sorts of things about myself and all sorts of things about you. And together we can work together to free ourselves from these things that wound us. So my question to us today, one of them is, how do we do this? How do we get rid of these colored lenses? Well, Peter came to Jesus with a question. It's a great question. You've heard it before maybe. He said, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Then he gives a number. He says, up to 7 times. I love that about Peter because Peter has a number. You have numbers in your head when it comes to all sorts of things. You go to buy a car, there's a number in your head what that car should cost. You go to buy a house, there's a number in your head what that house should cost. You're waiting in line, there's a number in your head about how many minutes it should take to get through that line. You've got a number in your mind. When it comes to forgiveness, You got a number in your mind about that too. You got a number in your mind about how many times you'll put up with this from that person, or how big of an issue you'll be willing to forgive. You may not realize it, but there is a number. There's a number that you have. And so Peter is so honest and just, what's the number, Jesus? Is it 7? 7's a good biblical number. Let's go with that. How's that? Seems reasonable. He's not asking this crazy question. He's being reasonable. And Jesus responds to him. He says this, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. As if to say, multiply your number, Peter. Peter, you need to become a person of grace. A person of grace. This statement of Christ, now it may or may not surprise you because it's been bounced around for a couple thousand years now, but no doubt to Peter, it gave him sticker shock. Because he looked at it and said, I can't do that number. That's a big number. You don't understand, Jesus. You don't understand what's going on here. And all too often, we have that same kind of response because you come to church, you interact with people in here, you need to forgive people. You need to be a person of grace. And we hear that until we get into a situation and we go, wait a minute, but you don't understand. You don't understand this situation. You don't understand what this person did to me. I'm not so sure that this hasn't exceeded some sort of maximum weight or maximum number of times. But Jesus wants Peter to get it, and he wants you and me to get it. So he launches into a story, and he tells Peter about a very wealthy man who discovered or was reminded when he was doing his accounting about another man who owed him money. And Scripture tells us he was owed 10,000 talents. What's 10,000 talents? Well, a talent is 71 pounds. So multiply 10,000 by 71. It's a big number, a huge, enormous amount of money that this guy owed him. In our purposes for today, let's say it's $1 million. And it's probably actually more than that. But let's say that he's owed $1 million. So this man, he calls his debtor into his office and he basically calls a loan. He says, you know what, it's time, man. It's time. The loan is due. You owe me my $1 million. Where's the $1 million? And the guy starts backpedaling. He says, I don't have the $1 million. Just give me some time and I'll pay for it. And the man says, nope, time's up. Matthew 18:25, he says, since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. That's kind of the way it worked in that day. There's no bankruptcy court going on. They just would sell you into slavery and use that money to pay off the debt. That's what was going to happen. Well, as you might imagine, this man pleads for mercy. He drops to his knees. Please don't do this to me. Look at my kids. Don't do this to my kids. You're gonna ruin us. You're gonna separate our family. You're gonna break us up. You're just gonna ruin me, my wife. Please don't do this to me. And Matthew 18:27 says, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. Now hear that carefully. Forgave him the debt. Didn't say you can pay me later, but he wrote off the debt. He knew it was an uncollectible debt. He knew he was never going to see that $1 million again. He said, you know what? I'm just going to forgive you the debt and let you and your family go on with your life. Now, I don't know what your number is, but I suspect it's somewhere south of $1 million. That's a pretty big number. One day this man owes $1 million. The next day he's debt-free. There is a word we use to describe this, and it's the word grace. This man was given abounding and abundant grace. Grace upon grace upon grace, 1,000,000 times over, not 7 times. And the story doesn't end there, though. The man who experienced grace, he left that office, and later he runs into another man who owed him 100 denarii. A denarii was about 1 day's wage. So for our purposes, 100 days of work, let's call it $15,000. No small amount of money, but significantly less than $1 million. So this guy who's been forgiven $1 million, he turns to the guy next to him who owes him $15,000, and he starts to give him the shakedown. Where's my $15,000? I need my $15,000. The guy says, I don't have your $15,000. And he starts begging for mercy. Matthew 18:30, but he refused and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. So that man who'd been forgiven $1 million debt is unwilling to forgive a $15,000 debt. And we have a word for that as well. The word for this is justice. This man was giving him what he deserved. He couldn't pay the debt, and justice needed to be served. And so he's giving him exactly what he deserved. But the reaction of the onlookers was astonishment, because they knew this guy had been forgiven $1 million. So they run and tell the guy who was owed $1 million, you're not going to believe. Remember that guy who owed you $1 million? He's like, well, of course I remember the guy who owed $1 million. He just gave someone the shakedown for $15,000, had him tossed in prison while you had freed him from $1 million. How does that make you feel? You know, what's going on? And the response is pretty significant. So think about this. In response to Peter's sticker shock over forgiving and forgiving and forgiving again, Jesus continues his story. He says, then the master summoned him and said to him, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? And in anger, his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. And then Jesus ties it all together with this statement. He says, so also my heavenly Father will do to every single one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. Now hear that carefully. Jesus unites, he ties together vertical forgiveness that we get from God and how that affects our horizontal forgiveness that we dispense to others. He says there's a direct relationship between the two. You experience grace and forgiveness for your $1 million debt, for your $10 million debt, for your $100 million debt. That forgiveness from God should inspire you to dispense grace to others. That should humble you in a way where you go, you know what? I will give. I will give as I have been given to. How we experience grace from God has a direct relationship to the forgiveness we give in our marriages, in our friendships, in our neighborhoods, in our roommates, in our business dealings. We must become a people of grace. The question is, how do we actually do this? And I have 3 thoughts that I want us to meditate on. And the first is this. The first is we must be a people who experience grace deeply. Experience grace deeply. I want you to think about this with me for a moment. What's a church? What is this gathering? Literally, you go into scripture, the word church, ecclesia, it means a gathering. What is this gathering of people? Well, it's a gathering of people who have deeply experienced the grace of God in their lives. That's what a church is intended to be. Now you think about that. What happens when we experience this multi-million-dollar forgiveness from our Creator? What kind of disposition does that leave us in? You have a group of people who are a humble people because they know that they owed a tremendous debt that they could never pay, and that debt has been wiped clean. That is a group of people. A church is intended to be a group of people who would be the most humble group of people you could ever be around. Not a bunch of arrogant finger-pointing people, as often the church is perceived to be, and sometimes rightly so. The church is intended to be a group of people who willingly and generously and graciously extend grace and forgiveness to others. Why? Because they get it. And they know they themselves, we ourselves, are in need of that very same grace. So who are we to hold it against another? I've got a verse I want us to read. It comes with a warning label because it's very strong language. But it's Jesus driving home this very point. He says this. He says, you have heard that it was said to people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. Now I want you to hear that for a moment because he's saying, you know, I'm in the context here, I'm pulling together a group of people. I'm not wanting a group of people that I'm going to call a church that just don't kill each other. Okay, that's not the goal. There's something more I want. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Now, again, it's not just about refraining from murder. Very strong language. If you're unwilling to forgive somebody, saying you're in danger of judgment. What is Jesus saying here? Because we know from other places in Scripture that anger is not within itself wrong. There are some very justified reasons for being angry in this world. But he is saying that when that anger festers and when it turns into finger-pointing judgment and calling out the fool, Raka, says calling someone Raka, that's Aramaic for like imbecile or idiot or fool, pointing the finger at somebody and saying, you fool. It says something about the condition of that person's soul. It says something about the condition of that person's heart. Why? Because the person who has authentically experienced grace from God cannot turn to the person sitting next to them, point the finger and say, you fool. It's just incompatible. Those two things, they don't work together. The person who has had grace poured out on him or poured out on her, that's going to splash over into the lives around them because that's what grace does. Think about this with me. And think about the story of that man forgiven the $1 million. The person who authentically and deeply knows how much they've been forgiven by God, that person can't turn to the person next to him or next to her and scream, "You fool." It just doesn't work that way. That person might turn to the person next to them and gently say, "What you did was hurtful, and I too have hurt others. I too have been the fool." That might come out. But the judgment and the condemnation, that's not there. So that's the first point of being people of grace. We must experience grace deeply. The second, this links naturally. I've kind of already said it. We must give grace generously. The third's going to come in here very quickly because I think what happens, or I know this happens because I see it all the time and I've done it myself. We hear this and we say, "Man, that makes a lot of sense. And I know I should do that. I should forgive that person, but." And we put that conjunction there, that but. No, I can't do that because you don't understand this situation. I mean, it makes sense. Jesus is a good teacher. I get it. What he's saying is right. I know that. But you don't understand what she did to me. And you don't understand what he did to me. There's absolutely no way I can truly forgive him or forgive her or really do that again. I can't subject myself to that. I won't do that, which leads to the third point. Experience grace deeply first. Give grace generously. The third, isolate grace from trust. Isolate grace from trust. Real interesting when you look at that story of the guy who forgave $1 million. Not only is it interesting what he did do, it's also interesting what he didn't do. Notice that he did not extend his line of credit, right? He forgave him the $1 million. He's no longer going to hold that against him. He's going to let that go. But he's not going to go, here's another million or here's another 1,000. Why? Well, we talk about this here. We've talked about it in More for Love People. It goes more deeply into this. A line I love: forgiveness is a gift. Trust is earned. Forgiveness is a gift. Trust is earned. I hear people all the time saying, I can't forgive him for what he did to me. And one of my reflex questions now is, let me ask, are you talking about forgiving him or are you talking about trusting him? Because yes, God would call you to establish peace with this person, but that doesn't mean that you need to trust him the way you have in the past. Because forgiveness is a gift and trust is earned. Trust is something that may take a significant amount of time. Forgiveness you can give in a moment, you can give in an instant. You can work through it and get to the place of forgiveness based on the forgiveness that's been given to you. You can't build trust in a moment. Trust may take hours, days, weeks, months, years. It may take a lifetime. It may never come. And just as there is power in leaning into how much we have been forgiven that empowers me to forgive others, I find there's tremendous power of separating forgiveness and trust, because when I separate the two and just isolate forgiveness, it becomes far more accessible. Because I can look at it and go, okay, yeah, I can forgive this person because I know I've done some dumb things too. I've hurt people too, and God has been gracious with me. I can be gracious with this person, but I got to separate it from trust, because trust is going to take time with this relationship. Trust has to build over time. Some situations are so very complicated. Really, the relationship, there needs to be a healthy separation, but that doesn't mean that there's not forgiveness given and peace established, and most of the time, the ability to build trust back over time. Forgiveness is a gift. Trust takes time. Now, with that in mind, I want us to think about this for a bit. We're this group of people, this church that comes together in large gatherings like this and comes together over the internet or out in Branson or down south. We come together. Why? We want to make a difference in each other's lives. And we want to make a difference in this world. We want to be difference makers. We want to do something meaningful and significant in our lives. We want to do this. And I see this happen where someone comes and they get involved and great things are happening, and they're getting involved in a network and get involved in a life group, and they're meeting people and they're doing things, and it's changing their life and it's changing the world and all that. But then something happens. Somebody gets dinged. Somebody gets offended. And I hear this line. I hear it often, this happened and that happened. And you know what? It's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. And that person spins out of that relationship and goes to another. And I think, oh, that's not good, because you know what's going to happen? they're going to get dinged over there too, and they're going to spin out of that. And they're going to spin out of the next group, and then they're going to go to the next church, and they're going to spin out of that church. Or they're going to go from one marriage to the next marriage, and they're going to spin out of that one. And I'm not isolating anyone here. We've all done this. We've all spun through relationships in our lives, but at some point, rather than spinning out of another one, we go toe-to-toe and we go, you know what? No more spinning. No more spinning, because I want to do this one differently. And with this line, it's not worth it. For a gateway, I want to introduce a new phrase. It's very simple. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth the effort. It's worth going the extra mile. It's worth making a phone call. It's worth sitting down face to face with someone and telling them where you've been hurt. We've got to do that, because when we do that, we discover new things about ourselves and new things about that other person. I don't know, it was either last week or the week before, John was talking about different relationships he's had, and he mentioned myself, and he and Kathy have been friends with Deborah and me for, 20 or so years now. And, we've done conflict together. It's one of the reasons why I love them so much. It's because we've gone through the tunnel of chaos together, and we've come out the other side. And guess what? We don't love each other less because of that. We love each other more because of that. Because we know each other more, and we trust each other more, and we've worked through our difficulties together. And when you work through your difficulties together with someone, they become your closest allies. You just have a unique bond with that person. So I want to replace, from it's not worth it to it's worth it. Say it again with me. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. In our relationships, it's worth it in our church, because we want to be liberated. We want to be free. We want to get rid of those glasses. John and I were talking about this yesterday on the phone, and just going, man, this is so important for our church to get this, because we have got to be a people. If we really want to make a meaningful difference in this world, we've got to be a people who know how to go toe-to-toe and work through things and forgive each other and dispense grace to each other. And we're thinking, what can we do to commit to that? Maybe after service, everyone pick their finger with a needle and blood, and we're in, we're going to do that. And thought, no, maybe that's not as good. But I do have two questions I want us to reflect on in this song at the end. And the first is this: who do I need to talk to? As you've been listening to this, I suspect somebody's come to mind. There's somebody who you're at odds with that you need to have a conversation with. Someone who you've either dinged or they've dinged you. And it says, who do I need to talk to? Matthew 18:15. It says this: if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. Not go and tell a few other people and then badmouth the person and never go talk to the person. No, just between you and that person, go have a conversation. Get it worked out with that person. Now, I'm not naive. There are times that doesn't work. And Scripture goes on from there. Won't go into it today of next steps you can take and such. But here's the deal. As a church, let's not be that person. Let's be the person always willing to play ball, always willing to work it out, always willing to go the extra mile to reconcile. Second question: what's my next step to be more relationally engaged? What do I need to do? Who do I need to call just to have lunch with? Who can we have over for dinner? What can I do to get more involved around here? Do I need to get more involved? Maybe I'm already involved, but I just need to take bigger risks relationally and get to know some people. What's my next step to be more relationally engaged?